Hello and welcome to the Leadership Exchange. Today I am joined by Abigail Vaughan, COO at Zellis. Welcome, Abigail.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
It's great to have you. And Abigail and I have just been catching up on what Zellis are doing in the marketplace. And I was interested to learn that although actually we might not know of Zellis as a brand, we would certainly know of them, certainly 1 in 5 of us, if we didn't receive money at the end of the month into our paycheck, because they are HR and payroll technology software providers in the UK and Ireland, providing a product called Resource Link, which is actually the #1 in the UK by market share. So a great sort of secret name, Zellis, behind a very essential service for many of us here in the UK. It's a private equity backed organisation with 2,000 employees, been established for several decades and gone through different ownership over time, and now really focused here in the UK and Ireland on doing a great job making sure we all get paid at the end of the month. So a little bit about Zellis there, but let's turn to you, Abigail, and think about, here we are actually, it's March, right? It's March, here we are 12 months on, actually, from when as leaders we were all faced with the lockdown, the first lockdown. We're just literally on the brink of that. We knew something was brewing this time last year, had no foresight as to what it was actually going to mean in practice, and has been quite a year. So, and I'm just really curious, how, you know, at the highest level, how has that last year been for you in role as COO in Zellis? What would be your, what's your reflection on 12 months?
Well, it's certainly been a year none of us expected, and I know that'll be common across many companies and people reflecting on the period. We'd actually just locked down our transformation plan for FY21 and our budgets about 20 days before we moved into lockdown, and it was becoming very clear very quickly that we're going to have to adjust the plan. A plan that's dependent on in-person working, on, you know, high numbers of workshops and traveling across the world was not going to work in a global pandemic. And we had to make choices ultimately, firstly about BAU and business continuity, but secondly about, could we also manage to progress the transformation agenda whilst working remotely, and how would our business be affected, and therefore how would our budget I've just submitted be affected. So we had to think about all of these things, and actually I've worked in many companies where you know, the company has said we're brilliant in a crisis, and I think Zellis has been no different to any other company in that respect. People have really come together. They've made extraordinary things happen. And we had 2,000 people issue with laptops that were mainly desktop users on the Friday before global lockdowns kicked in our UK, Ireland and India markets where our people are based. And they all had laptops. They were all carrying them to and from the office just in case. Then on the Tuesday after that Friday, we all did go into lockdown, and they were ready, and we did not miss 1 hour of processing. We didn't miss a single BACS file, which is essential to get you check, and we didn't miss a beat. And that was no small feat, and it wasn't a given because many of our people have never worked in an office. A lot of the things that we were doing in terms of tracking progress through a month were based on whiteboards. That's not possible in a remote environment. So not only did we need to adapt to a new device, a new way of connecting, a working from home environment, but they also had to change the way they work and the business processes overnight. And actually the team have come through it brilliantly, and I couldn't be prouder, but it's definitely put us all to the test.
Yeah. I mean, goodness me, I'm thinking as you tell that story that, I mean, so many people were under so much stress in the world, to then not actually receive their pay at the end of the month would have been enormous. So, you know, what you did in terms of supporting the population there.
And I think that's absolutely right. And we're acutely conscious of the broader higher purpose that we've got, right, which is to make people feel appreciated for the work they do, and therefore you have to be paid, and you have to be paid on time and correctly. And then additionally to that, obviously every economy was at risk of going into full meltdown, and governments everywhere then had to mobilize global intervention schemes. So the coronavirus job retention scheme for the UK, or the wage subsidy scheme for Ireland. And if you work in payroll, you're on the front line of that, and you're having to process legislation within hours of it coming out and changing all the time, when normally you get a 6-month notice on legislation, wouldn't get any notice. But you know the importance of stepping up at those moments, of ensuring that we embrace new legislation, that we help support companies that need to furlough people, and we ensure that those people are paid and their livelihoods are sustained. This hasn't been talked about a great deal, but actually there have been heroic efforts behind the scenes to make sure that happens. And it's saved millions of jobs, and no doubt helps save many families from the point of view of their livelihoods and ability to cope week in, week out. And I think the teams have done a brilliant job of having to absorb all of that on top of the challenges they're facing doing the day job. So yeah, couldn't be prouder, but it's definitely been a testing year.
Yeah, it's like anything in technology though, isn't it? I mean, when it's working, we all take it for granted, right? And when it doesn't, it's like, you know, stress. So it sounds like you're great unsung heroes, you and your colleagues.
I think the whole industry is. I think the whole industry are unsung heroes at this point, because as I say, you don't run a business in a way where you build for what if this happens, what if we have a global pandemic, what if the government comes out with 20 different versions of legislation in 3 weeks. You can't build a scenario for that. And so actually making it work, you know, across my company, but actually many of our competitors too, you know, credit to the whole industry, because I think they have really stood up when it's been important.
Fantastic. And here we are in 2021, looking back 12 months. What have you realized over that last 12 months that perhaps 12 months ago you didn't know, you were blind to in one way, shape or form, or just unaware of? What have you, as a leader, as a senior leader, what have you realized?
I think the key realization is that that actually where you work from and location isn't as important as we maybe all thought it was. And you know, we've been able to be far more productive remotely than I think we would have ever imagined before this was a forced situation on many of us. I mean, if I take my own personal experience, I'd done the odd day working from home before, but I'd never done even 2 days in a row working from home. And I've left the home, I think, once to go to the office in the last 12 months, in between the lockdowns. I mean, we can work effectively from anywhere. And I think the thing that has really been brought home to me is the people that contribute the most to the company and the higher performers are the same performers in the office or at home. And actually it's about your contribution. It's maybe about less where you're based and how you work. And we need to reflect on that as we go forwards. There are a lot of considerations in my industry around data security and privacy, and the home environment isn't ideal for all of those. But we've had government stay-at-home orders, we've had to adjust and work in that way, and our customers have been very, very supportive and empathetic to that. And we've demonstrated we can work productively and effectively, and our service has got better over the last 12 months, if you ask many of our customers, rather than anything else, because we've been very, very disciplined, very, very focused, and we've made it work.
It's really interesting hearing you say your service has got better. One of the things that I've also come across, and I'd be interested to know your experience, is that engagement has got better in organizations as well, you know, through engagement surveys. Not universally, some have gone one way, some have gone the other, but many have seen a real uplift in engagement within the culture?
We've seen a massive uplift in engagement. So that's absolutely true, both in the UK, Ireland, and in Southwest India, where we're based. We've seen a huge jump. And I think that's really down to two things. One is it's about how your employer treats you at moments like that. You know, we put a very significant effort into supporting our teams through this period. You know, we made sure that they could work. We made sure that we rapidly trained mental health first aiders so they had access to mental health supports. We've put in place things like an hour of the day where you can't schedule meetings, so that people just get a break off Teams or Zoom for 1 hour a day and can do private work or effectively go out for a walk and get some fresh air. So we've made that a top-down decision. We loaned laptops to people for people that had children at home and were homeschooling and didn't have the right devices. So I think how you respond at those moments, I think people remember. And when you're seeing lots of job losses in other industries around you, and we've been fortunate that we've not really had to do that, then I think people have felt very, very grateful to that. I think from our customers' point of view, they've also seen that when it counted, we've stepped up. You know, we didn't have to support some of these government schemes. It's not mandatory legislation. It's not something that everybody needs to do. But we felt it was the right thing to do, and we've done it, you know, in terms of building out our software at no extra charge. And I think that our customers have seen that that's really counted. I think we've also been very disciplined on priorities and really focused on that customer experience through the last 12 months to make sure that it doesn't feel like a poor experience because people are now working in different environments with background noise and things like that. So we have seen a benefit. I am starting to see it dwindle, not so much on the customer side, but internally, because I think what we're starting to get to 1 year on as well is that it's becoming, it's lasted a lot longer than any of us expected. And it's hard to really sustain kind of motivation, culture, excitement for this period of time. I think people now are really missing the more social side of work, and so there is fatigue definitely setting in.
The virus itself has been provocative. It's provoked us all to do things differently, things that we might not have just lent into, you know, like some of the beautiful examples that you gave. You know, you got some mental health first aid training sorted out immediately. You know, you were sending laptops to home. Yes, some of that's about crisis management, but actually it's provoked some new ways of leading, some new ways of being with our people, of operating in an organization. What must we preserve going into the future from that provocation that the virus has brought into business?
I mean, undoubtedly, it has accelerated our digital transformation efforts. I mean, businesses have talked about digital transformation and digitizing processes and ways of working for years. And we've probably done 5 years of work in 6 months, right? I mean, the pace of acceleration and having to adopt new ways of working, digital-based ways of working, I think is something we've got to maintain. I don't think we should be going back to the office and going back to whiteboards or spreadsheets. I think we absolutely need to be focused on, you know, leveraging the great capability of things like Microsoft Teams or Zoom, and, you know, just being much more visual. We used to do some conference calls, nobody would turn their cameras on. Like, we've changed all of that, and I don't want to go back to the old ways of working because I do think video is a lot more personal. So just some of those new ways of working that we've adopted, we really must maintain, in my view. I think also we've worked super hard at ensuring that we drive cross-functional working through the last 12 months. And it's been a great leveler in many respects, right? If you've got 2,000 people now working all from home, everybody is dialing into calls and video calls and so on. And therefore, which department you sit in, you're leaving your kind of department name at the door. It's just Abigail's joining this call, or Peter or Nick. And therefore, the silos have broken down, in my view, from a cross-functional working. And actually, in a way that in an office it doesn't so much, because you might I sit in the managed services team, or I sit in the technology team or the finance team. that's kind of gone over the last 12 months. And again, I don't want to see us revert back to, I work in this team. I want to see us as, I'm tackling this problem jointly with you. So I think we have to absolutely protect that. You didn't ask this question directly, but I'll answer it anyway. In terms of what I'd be happy to lose, I think we have definitely lost more of the social side of work. Yeah. Work has become very transactional. It's like meeting after meeting after meeting with scheduled topics and agendas, and you have to be super disciplined about your diary and so on. But we've kind of lost the informality and the kind of knowing the people behind the stories. In many respects, we've had a great insight into people's home lives working from home, because you've met the dog and you met the children, and they come in and have cuddles on the calls, and that's wonderful. And I don't want to lose that. But actually, just as colleagues, I think we've lost that kind of team morale and team building type piece. I think the future's got to be a hybrid of the two models.
Yeah. And in the focus that has been essential over this last year, working through crisis, in that, when you're focused on anything, by definition, there's things missing, there's things out of awareness. And I'm just curious, if we sort of pull the blinkers back from all being focused on the pandemic, what's missing in our conversations as leaders at the moment? What's out of awareness or has been parked that we need to bring back onto the table in our conversation, through our determination over the last year to survive, frankly?
I think we've lost some fun.
Okay.
As colleagues. And you spend a lot of time at work. I spend more time at work than anywhere else in my life. And therefore, the kind of the fun, the social elements, and I'm not talking about going out to the pub after work, although occasionally, that's a nice thing to do. I just mean the kind of like the really getting to know people and the motivations behind why people come to work and why they do what they do. So, it's taken me 2.5 years to find out that one of my DRs is a great fan of the Archers, right? I love the Archers on Radio 4. I absolutely love it. I didn't know that. And I can't help but think that if we were based in the same location and like at a coffee machine, it would have come up a lot earlier. It's really hard now. I mean, another example on Monday evening, obviously, is the highly controversial Meghan and Harry interview, right? Now, normally you go into work on a Tuesday and say, did you see that interview? What did you think? Yeah. And actually those conversations aren't happening, because at 8 o'clock, we're going to discuss the pipeline. At 8:30, we're going to discuss deal one. At 9 o'clock, we're going to discuss customer satisfaction surveys. And your day is much more structured and governed. It makes it very productive. But I do think we're at risk of losing some human connection, which is actually really important, because the human connection helps you want to work with and for people and give discretionary effort over time. And I think that we're at real risk of it's a job, it's transactional, that discretionary effort being lost over time.
Yeah. Maybe we need a half hour in for let's discuss the Meghan and Harry interview. Yeah?
Maybe we do.
We'll talk about that after this conversation. No, it's a lovely example. And I've heard other teams talk about, we've lost a bit of the fun. We're being really productive. We're seeking to do the right thing. We're pulling together. We're delivering some amazing stuff, but it doesn't feel like much fun. Actually, all the time that I gave to commuting, I'm now working. It's not extra home time. In fact, I'm working harder, longer hours. And
I think that's right. And at the beginning, in the first maybe 6 months, we did try and put a concerted effort around fun. So, held like a wine evening or whatever occasionally. But the reality is, like, I am on Teams from 8 in the morning to 7 at night, and I might have a 1 hour time in the day if I'm being disciplined when I try not to be on video. But it is intensive working through this medium. So the last thing, frankly, I want to do is then at 8 o'clock is go and basically have a social meeting on it. Like you want to switch off from technology and you want to kind of meet people in the flesh. And therefore it gets hard now a year in, maintaining more kind of fun and social aspects of work.
No, absolutely. So if this last 12 months, the existence of the virus in the world has had some positive purpose. I mean, there's a fight against it. There's, all the vaccine programs, recognition we need to tackle this as a world, a resistance to it. But if we sort of embrace it for a moment and just sort of say, what's it seeking to cure or enable in our world? And this in no way is sort of then diminishing the cost to life that has been there and is very real and continues to be there. But I'm wondering if we stand right back from it and say, right, what is this is seeking to get our attention around as the human race?
I mean, I don't really kind of subscribe to a point of view that, this whole thing's happened to kind of help us learn lessons, but realistically, we have learned some, right? And I think if I stand back from the last kind of 12 months or so, I think what it has done is really help us reflect and be more open-minded on there are different ways to work that are just as effective.
Right.
And I feel like we've operated in extremes. So before, there was millions of people across the UK who would get up at really crazy times in the morning, rush to get ready and out the house and go on commutes. My commute was an hour and a half each way, 3 hours a day commuting time. And, you're pressed into a train and you're up against a window and you're going underground and you feel like a lab rat in many respects, right? And I used to use the time meaningfully as thinking time by and large.
Yeah.
But actually, that was 3 hours a day that I could do without. And if you had a particularly bad commutes, and what those conditions can be like, they can be really tough. Then you come to work with a really bad mood, you're not feeling your best, you might be feeling hot and sweaty and all those kinds of things. And, you stand back and then you might kind of do 14 hours in the office and go through the commute in reverse and you're looking at it going, gosh, like what was I doing? Like, what was I doing working like that? Whereas this is the other extreme, right? It's like never leave the house. I feel like we're under house arrest in many respects. I never leave this desk. These are my four walls. And this is what I spend my whole time doing. And I've never worked as hard, to your point. And I've got to believe that from a sustainability point of view and what's right for individuals is us between those two, right? Yeah. Where you have that contact time in the office, but you don't necessarily need to travel and be in person for every day and every session and every meeting.
Yeah.
So I think what it's probably teaching us is, we've literally been at one extreme and gone to the other extreme, and it's swung the pendulum so far. And I think we need to reflect on which way do we want to go when we come out of this.
Yeah. And that's a decision everybody individually needs to make, as well as, what's right for the organisation. And I think there'll be some very different conversations that people will be bringing to their organisation as a result of the last year, for sure. So how has this changed your leadership forever, Abigail? This experience of the last year, how has it really shaped you and how you will lead, how you are leading perhaps, but how you will continue to lead?
I think probably in two ways. I think firstly, we were quite a dispersed organisation before, and I've only actually ever worked in largely dispersed organisations, and therefore you had to be very good at communicating before to reach lots of people in different audiences and be really clear on the message and the priorities. I think that's just been sharpened and heightened through the pandemic, because you can't just talk to one office and get everybody on the same page. You're kind of talking to everybody with lots of things going on in their lives and having to really build that environment virtually. So I've had to adapt my communication approach slightly for that. And the thing that I will be taking in a more normal world, if we return to such a thing, is, do not underestimate the power of communications, regular communications, clarity, etc., etc. That doesn't change. I think the second area for me is probably around empathy and kindness cost nothing.
Yeah.
And when I see what some of our teams have been dealing with, partners being furloughed and or being made redundant at short notice, having a significant drop in household income, having parents with COVID, parents in nursing homes not being able to visit them, having children being homeschooled, which they're having to do in the middle of also contributing to their work. And significant change at work. People have been spinning so many plates and balancing so many things that, some people won't have come out the other side of this, unfortunately, and very sadly. But of the people that do, they've done more than they could ever imagine, but they're tired, right? They're tired of basically managing all of this.
Yeah.
And I think as a leader, it would have been super easy over the last 12 months to basically say, well, that's not my situation, so I'm not going to care about that. This is what I expect of you. And that personally doesn't sit well with me. That is not an approach I've taken. But I guess the question is if we can be empathetic and kind through a pandemic and what everybody's dealing with at home, we should be able to do it non-pandemic times as well, and recognizing the fact that, people have got other things going on in their life besides work, and we need to be kind of open to that and talk on an individual level about how do we make this work for them.
Yeah. Personally, I love the intimacy that's actually come in the conversation in organizations. People sharing things about their own health, their own family, as you were saying earlier, the dog, the children, everything, has come into the conversation. And that's an insight that we wouldn't have necessarily had. It's been provoked. People have needed to declare their own health situation that they were just self-managing, but needed to now be known by the organization, for example. And I very much hope that quality of conversation is preserved in organizations going forward, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also it's been an opportunity to see a different side of leaders as well. The fact that we're all human, we're dealing with many of the same challenges. I have young children. I've got more support than most, but the context, the challenge of homeschooling and having a busy job, etc., applies to many. And I think one of the things that we decided to do in Zellis is set up a parent working group, support group for parents, and we actually decided to help pull childcare at times, right? So we know some schools have provided really good support, but other schools haven't provided any support. And if you're a working parent, how do you keep them occupied? So one of the things we decided to do was kind of regular slots where people would take ownership for looking after people's children virtually, right? The parents had to be in the background and working, but we did that. So I ended up reading children's stories to kids for an hour to just keep them amused and entertained. And I think, that didn't cost me anything, right? It cost me 1 hour of my time, and those kids loved it. And we played Simon Says, and they really got engaged in it. But I think importantly, for the teams that we have as well, and for those parents, it really helped them. But for our teams, it kind of reminds them that, our leaders are human, right? So I have kids that I read these stories to. You don't see me normally in kind of mummy reading story mode, like CBB style. But actually, why not? So I think it's been a helpful reminder that, we're not all in the same boat, but we are all in the same storm. And actually, let's have a conversation about that.
I love that analogy. We're not all in the same boat, we are in the same storm. Yeah, great. So finally, Abigail, looking back now, here we are, looking back on March 2020, if you could advise that younger you from 12 months ago, knowing all you know through, all you've led through in this time, what would be your advice to yourself 12 months ago?
I think we've got most of it right. I hope that I've got most of it right, given how it's unfolded. The thing that I didn't know and I really underestimated was the duration. So if I had my time again, I would have been saying, Abigail, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And you've got to set yourself up and your teams up in a way that is now going to be sustainable for at least a 12-month period. And it's probably going to be 18 months. And because we all thought it's going to be weeks, maximum a couple of months, we didn't do that, and therefore we have been working at a forensic pace for a very long period of time. But you can see evidence in some quarters of burnout emerging. And that's because we've never really had an end date to this, right? It's always just around the corner. This is another lockdown will emerge, and there'll be, you know. And so if I could have my time again, it would be pace yourself, because you set the direction for the team, you're a role model. Help ensure your team pace themselves and ensure this is really sustainable.
Great. Abigail, thank you so much for this conversation today. It's lovely to see you again and really appreciate your contribution to the Leadership Exchange.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
It's a great pleasure. If you'd like to contribute to the Leadership Exchange, put a comment below and I'll be in touch. It would be great to hear your voice and share that with other leaders. But for now, thank you very much. And again, thanks, Abigail. See you soon.